In my last segment, I talked about Agatha Basilar. She is a progressive Democrat who is challenging Nancy Pelosi in a primary in San Francisco. And I asked the question, is it better to have a progressive Democrat ousting Nancy Pelosi, who is a corporate Democrat who's nearly 80 years old, because we need to get rid of these incumbents? You know, a lot of people have said Nancy Pelosi is not a socialist and it's better, but in my opinion, I disagree. I think it would be better to get a younger individual in to get rid of these incumbents, be it AOC or otherwise. Because think about it. You had Joe Crowley in AOC's district, and he was this long-standing, 10-term incumbent. And what did he really represent other than, honestly, nothing? Corporate interests, the corporate Democrats. He is not a person of the people, whether it's good or bad. Trump is a populist. He's not part of this political class. And now we have the corporate Democrats who remain. And in my opinion, I feel like this. I don't care for the most part who replaces them. Just, it's time for the incumbents to go. For the most part, I would say. There are certainly some people I think are great, principled individuals who should stick around. But at a certain point, man, it's time to get rid of these 30-plus year politicians. It just seems so strange to me. Now, I brought up this question and about Agatha Basilar because I recognize that her politics are widely opposite to mine. Aside from her, she opposes private prisons and she opposes very, very anti-war. That we're in alignment on very strongly. So I thought it'd be fair to do this story about AOC to represent the challenges that come along with it. While I can recognize ousting an incumbent like Pelosi, in my opinion, would be good because it's time for change. We just need to get rid of the establishment. Not a fan. Just don't like it. They're ineffective, duplicitous. Just bring on somebody that I can actually talk about ideas with and somebody new, and we'll see what happens. That being said, AOC certainly is worthy of criticism. And while when she was first elected, when she won the primary, I did praise her, we've now seen that she's become an ineffective, ignorant politician. The reason I'm doing this is to point out, while I may feel strongly to a degree that Pelosi should be primaried by a young progressive, I also want to mention it's not necessarily the best thing in the world. Now, you can argue Nancy Pelosi should stay because she is at least somewhat moderate, and AOC has ridiculous ideas that seem not to make very much sense. In the end, I still think, I don't know. I think it's better that AOC got elected because now we can actually see the absurdity. It's better for it to be front and center instead of hiding behind, the rock, lurking in the shadows, and shielded by someone claiming to be moderate. AOC backs anti-cop protesters who stormed Brooklyn's subway station as she tweets, "Arresting people who can't afford a $2.75 fare makes no one safer." It's not about making someone safer. Now, I will agree and disagree to an extent. Arresting people and putting them in jail when they're poor and can't afford the train is a problem. I would also like to point out, praising people storming the MTA over not just the fare, but because a fight broke out and the cops tried stopping it and the cops got aggressive, it's a complicated issue. I'm not going to sit here. I'll tell you this, man. I've been on the stick end of a bad cop interaction on more than one occasion, and it is horrifying. I've also been saved by police. I think for the most part, most interactions I've had with cops have been positive and important because I've typically interacted with them when they were helping me. But I would also say that I've had more negative experiences than the average person. I've had cops try planting drugs on me, falsely arrest me, threaten, me and my friends, and just other horrifying things where you watch them and you can't do anything about it. However, what we see here is, well, it's AOC taking the emotional reaction, which I think is very, very ignorant. Why do police arrest somebody for fare hopping? Because the trains in New York City are collapsing, okay? The infrastructure is terrible. They announced a couple of years ago they needed to repair the L train, which brings you from hipster Williamsburg into Manhattan, and it was panic, just pure panic. Well, here's the problem, man. The trains are failing and need to be repaired. What people like AOC don't seem to realize is the fare increase is probably due to two things. There are more people in New York, and typically more and more come. There are a lot of people who use the train. The fare isn't just to support the cost of fixing the trains and making them run on time, but it's also a slight deterrent for complete overuse and abuse. If everybody who used the train, who wanted to use the train, could use the train and did, you would have substantially more people. Unfortunately, there is a problem that exists no matter what you do. Some people are just don't have the money to take the train. Now you may be saying, Tim, that's horrifying. Everybody should be able to use public transit. Okay. This is the problem that the left doesn't seem to understand when it comes to socialism. The train can't carry an infinite number of people, nor can it even carry the amount of people it currently is ferrying. The infrastructure is crumbling. They were relying on the Amazon jobs to pay taxes, and AOC shot that down. She led the protests. She can deny it all day and night, but we know she was in the financial district leading protests against Amazon. She's high profile, and they left. They needed that tax revenue to help fix the infrastructure. But now they've increased the price because they need to fix the infrastructure. If you gave the trains for free to everybody, imagine now that the 20 or 30% or so of people who can't afford the train and typically don't are using it 10 times more. Imagine now that the trains are free or unenforced. They don't enforce fare hopping. People use it 10 times more. Let's say this. Let's say everybody in New York does use the train, but they only use it once or twice a day because it does cost $2.75. So you say, stop arresting people for doing it. Then all of a sudden, everybody says, ain't nobody going to arrest me for doing it. I'll use it whenever I want. Now the use of the subway goes up and that one person's riding 5 times. The trains are going to fall apart. This translates to a lot of major issues, and it's part of why socialism does not work. Now, let me tell you straight up, progressive policy, like moderately progressive, not like super far left, yeah, it works. The city can subsidize the infrastructure of the train and make the costs a little cheaper by taxing the rich and real estate and other areas, and it's still sustainable so long as the amount of people using it are within a certain threshold. It's like, you know what, man? Imagine you have a bridge, and there's 100 people who want to walk across it. And if they all do it at the same time, the bridge collapses. Well, you can't. Some people are going to have to wait. They take their turn, and maybe never get a chance. It's the same argument when it comes to healthcare. This is the craziest thing about universal healthcare that's never factored in and why Elizabeth Warren's plan makes literally no sense. Healthcare adapts with technology. Let's say today, universal healthcare for everybody. Tomorrow, a major corporation invents a cure for every form of cancer. Boom, cancer cure. However, it requires extremely intricate and precise methods of creation, and there's only one lab that can do it, and they only have 25 workers in that lab. It takes about 3 months to manufacture the cure, and it's new. Are we then going to say everyone in this country is entitled to that cure? No, of course not. How do we then scale up the issue? For me personally, I do think we can get to a point where we have a base level of care, like if you break your arm, we can set it for you. Those things are simple. Cancer, on the other hand, probably still going to require private insurance. How can Elizabeth Warren offer up universal health care? How can New York City not enforce fare hopping? AOC is siding with regular angry people who don't understand how things work, probably because it gets her more followers, gets her more donations, and that's the problem, in my opinion, with populism. I will say, elitism should not be defended because there's good populism, there's bad populism, but elitism is elitism, and I've seen some people try and defend elitism, and no, thank you. Elitism is the idea that the elites should be in charge. For the most part, it's complicated. I know people might argue. But just because you're a wealthy, privileged elite does not mean you're better at running something, and you probably have less experience. Now, when it comes to populism, you can seek to work towards the will of the people as a whole. And typically the media will slam the kind of populism that AOC does, where it's just blindly supporting whatever the outrage mob says. Nah, none of that. But there is a good form of populism where you actually cater to what the people need. And it's complicated. It's a complicated process. Elitism, however, is more of the idea that you were born rich, therefore you're allowed to rule. Nah, none of that. In the end, I'll say this. The protest that she is praising was not just about fares. A fight broke out on the train, and something happened, and a cop ended up punching a kid and arresting him. And they said it was brutal, it was excessive force. And while I certainly think the cop probably shouldn't have punched him, and cops can be aggressive, there was another arrest where the cops came into a train, threw a guy on the ground, and arrested him. And they said, hey, you're too rough with these people. You shouldn't do that. Okay. The problem is, while we can criticize the cops for being heavy-handed, it wasn't like the dudes are dead or in the hospital. They just got roughed up. It wasn't like a nickel ride. It was literally like a dude was fighting and a cop punched him back. Like people were fighting the cops, like everybody move, and the dude does something and then he punches them. I could be wrong about that. And I certainly think cops should be criticized when they step off the line. But this protest it shows, in my opinion, it used to be about police brutality. Now it's about police arrested a guy? No, seriously, a guy got arrested and they said, why did they arrest him like that? That's crazy. And it's like, they went on a train, they surrounded him, they threw him on the ground, a little rough with him. I don't think it was that outrageous. And now they're saying it was excessive. It's like, that's what's getting you mad? Now you're protesting? And they added a bunch of rhetoric about the fare and fare hopping. So AOC is defending them. I'll wrap this up. You get the point. The fare is there because you have to fix the infrastructure. They're not infinite trains. Trains break down. Trains need to be fixed. Someone has to do the job. If you think you can give literally everything away for free, eventually the whole system collapses. It doesn't make sense. But they don't think about this. So here's why I highlight this. Because I did a segment earlier saying maybe Nancy Pelosi should be primaried by someone who's on the far left. And I mentioned her name several times, Agatha Basilar. I then criticize AOC so you can see the inherent risk to bringing on a young, inexperienced progressive who's more idealistic than rational, and it can actually make things worse. AOC cost New York the Amazon deal, and they needed that tax money to fix infrastructure. At the same time, still, I lean towards get the incumbents out, man. They're old, uninterested, corporate interest, career politicians. I'd rather have an activist than a career politician who doesn't care about anybody, wants to have a fancy steak dinner down in DC, and is a do-nothing. That's just me. And if it's AOC, you know what? I'll admit it. I would rather have AOC, and let me say a few more things. AOC is infinitely better than Crowley. Crowley, look, people probably like him. I can't tell you much about him. But AOC has done a few things. For one, it's about time there was a change in this country in terms of these old incumbent career politicians. AOC is not that. She was a bartender. Okay? She is somebody who came from the people, and she may be ignorant. She may have bad ideas. But you know what? Hey, that's America. We get to see these ideas. Here's the next thing she's done. She's allowed us to see a high-profile character with these ideas, and we've been able to talk about them instead of allowing them to fester and hide behind crony corporate Democrats and career politicians. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, you get the point. They don't care about anything. They have no principles. They are just there to say whatever. Listen, Pelosi and Schumer may as well go up on stage and go, yada, 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 whatever I'm supposed to say, and walk away. The thing about when Dave Chappelle did that is that he was pushing back on those who demand he toe the line. The Democrats willfully just toe whatever safety line they can, whatever makes the most sense, so they can get reelected and do nothing. What are they doing? So you know what? At least with AOC, we can talk about it. We can argue against it. We can call her ignorant, and we can shine a light on these problems. Because I'll tell you what, the one thing these protests did, they accomplished their goal in the long run. We are talking about the infrastructure needing to be fixed. We're talking about the problems. We're talking about policing. We're talking about it. And that is so much better than sweeping under the rug and doing literally nothing. And I can respect that. So yes, I would prefer AOC over any of these other, do nothing corporate career politicians. I would rather have an ideological activist as opposed to one of these corporate leeches that want to get elected for the sake of being like, I got elected, and then do nothing. I don't know, though. I don't think I'm always right. I could be wrong. Maybe it's better to have do-nothing politicians. I can't really tell you. But I kind of feel like the Democrats have been riding this wave for a long time, and it's caused this anger and outrage to fester up, not just on the left, but on the right, too. And Trump was the result on the right. And the left is angry about it. Well, I'll tell you what, the problem isn't Trump. Trump is a symptom of this greater cultural phenomenon, and he replaced the old establishment politicians. Maybe the same thing now needs to happen on the Democrat side. Anyway, I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Podcast every day at 6:30 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time.